Level 5, Scale Technique. And this lesson will introduce the hold technique for fretting hand alignment. This is going to set the stage for the next level as we introduce scale technique into our practice routine. And it's also going to help us with chords down the road, as we can't play several notes at once until we can play a single note at a time. Don't forget to review level 1 on how to hold the guitar, and also you're going to want to cut your fingernails because you cannot play on the fingertips, which is real important for technique, with long fingernails. Providing that our fretting hand is in alignment with a fretboard, we should settle into this pretty easy. And that has to do with the angle of the neck. We want a nice tilt on this neck so that it is aligned with our fretting hand. In other words, we want the knuckles on our hand running parallel to the fretboard. Without that neck angle, we end up pulling the guitar away from our fingers. And then we have to over-adjust to push the notes. And that's just too much work. So it's best to set a good neck angle so that it fits the anatomy of our fretting hand. We're just working with what nature has given us. Keeping your thumb somewhere behind the second finger, behind the neck, will help you to keep your hand in alignment. You don't want your thumb too high or too low. That's going to cause you to bend your wrist, which will give you a weak hand. You also don't want it too far to the right or to the left. That will also weaken your hand and prevent you from extending to grab other notes. You just want that thumb somewhere behind the second finger. Now, some of you might be behind the third finger or the first finger. We're all built a little different. But the main idea is that that thumb is in the center of the hand so that when you push a note, you maintain good fretting hand alignment. Another thing that will help your alignment is keeping the elbow in, right up against the ribs. Notice as I pull the elbow out, it pulls the fingers away from the fretboard. So to correct that, we just bring that elbow in, and watch how that pinky whips around, and now I can grab all the notes cleanly. You'll also notice as you go higher up the fretboard, the frets get closer together. And this is a good option for those of you who have trouble stretching. Because as you go down further, the frets get really wide, and look how open my hand is in this position. So if you're having trouble stretching, just play higher up the neck. So with all that being said, this is your end result, the hold technique. And I'll refer to this as the hold technique throughout levels for guitar. So to set it up, I want you to take your fretting hand out, open it up, and while maintaining a straight wrist, I want you to curve the fingers so that they're pointing back at your guitar. And at the same time, you'll open up the hand. We're going to assign fingers 1, 2, 3, and 4 behind frets 5, 6, 7, and 8. And you want to play right up against the fret. That's where you're going to get the best sound. And just in case some of you don't remember, a fret is the metal piece. You don't want to play on top of the fret. You want to play just behind the fret. You'll notice as you move back this direction, you'll start to buzz. But the closer you get to the fret, the better the sound quality, and you don't have to push as hard. So this is the end result. That thumb is just behind the second finger. Your wrist is nice and straight, and you're playing on the fingertips. And that's one of the main reasons I'm having you cut your fingernails, because when your nails get long, it forces you into this position, which is weak. You want to play right up on the fingertips. And you do that by curving the fingers, not the wrist. That puts you into a weak position. And I tell my students that if I can see their fingernails like this, they're not playing on the fingertips. So watch as I curve the fingers. I'm now hiding the fingernails from view, and that means I'm in a strong position. And finally, I want to make you aware of the gap between the fingers and the angle of fingers 1 and 4. And when it comes to the gap, we need to put the biggest gap between the fingers as possible. Now, it's going to be hard to do between fingers 2 and 3. They're kind of fused together. But we can get big gaps between fingers 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. What we don't want is this. For those of you who are my sight readers, you know how important it is to keep the hand open so that you don't lose the notes, because if you're reading the page, you can't look back at your guitar. So by keeping the hand open, all you have to do is push the finger and you have the right note. Now the other thing is the angle of fingers 1 and 4. And if you notice, fingers 2 and 3 are straight on. You can see that with the lines right there. They're right in the middle of the finger. But when it comes to fingers 1 and 4, they're angled in like this. So I'm on the corner tip here, and I'm on the corner tip here with the 4th finger. That's natural. You don't want this. It seems like that would be the right technique, but it's very uncomfortable. You almost feel like you're breaking your shoulder to do this. No, you want to curve it in. It's just natural for fingers 1 and 4 to point towards the center of the hand. So when you perform your whole technique, that's what it's going to look like. You're going to have nice curved fingers with fingers 1 and 4 angled in and a good gap with a nice open hand. For practice, you'll perform the whole technique, evaluate your alignment, release, and then repeat. Upon evaluation, you're checking to make sure that you're right up against the frets, you're on the fingertips, you've got a good gap between the fingers, you're angling fingers 1 and 4, your thumb is somewhere behind that second finger, you're not too high or too low. All those things are going through your mind as you're checking your alignment. And then you release, and then you come back. Release, and come back. And over time, you're going to snap into that position. Your muscle memory will get to the point where you don't even have to think about it. It just becomes a natural part of you as a guitar player. So if you're a baseball player, you've got your batting stance. If you're a football player, you've got your three-point stance. If you're a martial artist, you've got your karate stance. And if you're a golfer, you've got your golfing stance. Well, we've got our whole technique. That is our batting stance, so to speak. Once you've mastered the hold on a single string, you can begin working on your string crossings with the hold, just like I'm doing here. And your goal is to be able to snap into each string with the whole technique. And notice I'm keeping everything nice and consistent. Got a nice open hand, I'm playing close to the frets. And I want you to pay attention to my thumb movement. As I am on the little E string, my thumb is on what I'm going to call the lower part of the neck for now. Of course, the guitar sounds nothing like it looks. You'll often hear me refer to this string here as a high note and this string here as a low note. And technically that's correct because of the sounds. But just to keep things simple, I'm going to say this is our low position and this is our high position for right now. So the thumb is now in the low position and it moves up with the hand. And see, that's peeping over the top. That allows me to keep a straight wrist. And as I come back down, the thumb moves along with the hand. Just like that. And you can see it from the side. I'm in a low position. And as I move up, so does the thumb. And as I move down, the thumb goes with it. It's a very subtle movement. It's not like this. It's a very subtle movement. You just need enough to keep that wrist nice and straight. If you don't do that, what happens is you end up bending the wrist to compensate like I'm doing here. My thumb is locked in the low position, and look at it from the side. See that? So I started off okay, but I didn't move the thumb with it, and now I'm really bending my wrist. And the same thing happens if you keep the thumb locked in the high position. As I go low, I end up having to pull my wrist back like this. Not so bad on an electric guitar, but on a classical guitar, that can be quite severe. You don't want to fall back into this position. So that thumb stays somewhere behind that second finger, and it moves along with the hand. Now at some point you're going to run across this situation where you're brushing up against the neck. So you run out of room. So in that case, you can go ahead and open up the fingers like this. I'd rather you do that than bend the wrist like this. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Now that you've mastered the whole technique with string crossings, you can begin working on shifting, just like I'm doing here. You'll notice as you play down in this part of the neck, you have to open up the hand because the frets are wider. And as you play down here, you have to close the hand a little bit more. I still have a gap between the fingers, but the frets are closer together. And right now I'm just shifting from low to middle to high. That's a good exercise. When you make the shift, be aware of your thumb position. You want your thumb to trace that second finger, just like this. So when you shift this way, it's tempting to want to lock your thumb, and look what's happening. It's dragging, and that puts me into a weak position. And the same thing can happen in this direction. It's not as bad, but it's still dragging. So you want to lightly move your thumb across the fretboard in such a way that it's maintaining that position behind one of these fingers here. Now you can make up your own shifting exercise. Right now I'm going from fret to fret like this and gradually working my way down. But you can be creative with your own type of shifting. So if you want to do things like diagonals, like this, here, 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 you're working on your shifting as well as your string crossing. So this is a good one. I just made it up. Or you can do little checkerboard movements like here, 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 here. I just made that one up. So you can come up with many different patterns for your own string crossing exercise. The main thing is that you practice them. Your final exercise is a fixed finger exercise designed to develop strength, flexibility, and independence of motion. Mainly independence of motion. So when you're playing scales, you got to be able to move your fingers independent of each other. And so we call this a fixed finger exercise because we're going to fix 3 fingers and move only 1 finger. So you're going to see this is going to be quite a challenge for those of you who are beginners. So here are the rules. You got to fix 3 fingers. So in this case, fingers 2, 3, and 4 have to remain in place like you're doing the whole technique, and then you just move finger 1 up and down like this. And then you move on to number 2. And then I think the toughest one is number 3. Some of you may have some trouble with this one. And then finally, number 4. That's all there is to it. Once you've mastered the first string, you can move to the next string and do the same thing. Now I'm making this look easy, but this is not easy if you're a beginner. So it's just a gradual approach. And if you need to let go and let your hand rest, do so. You want to work with a strong, rested hand. And with time, you're going to get really good at this. And you can get creative with this exercise. You don't have to do 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. You can go 1, 3, 2, 4. Or you can go 4, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1. I mean, any combination that you want to do. You can do repeated notes, or you can do 1 note at a time. Or you can just do them randomly, just like I'm doing here. And then eventually you can work on different frets, like I'm doing here. High notes, low notes. Everything that you did with your previous whole technique exercise, you can do with the fixed finger exercise. The main thing is that you do them, and you will benefit, especially in the next lesson where we introduce scale technique as part of our practice.